Woo! The Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star, here for a little Wednesday Q&A. And, well, there's a few less people this time around for the Wednesday Q&A, meaning that I think a lot of people really either, well, I don't know if they were disgusted at the fact that I've decided to read a book by Hakeem Bey that's not some kind of ANCAP through and through book, and that doesn't believe in the idea that, everybody's got to be free or nobody's free or something like that. I don't know if that pissed people off or what, or if it was Patreon's proposed fee structure change. We're going to talk about that at the end of this podcast, but I'll let the cat out of the bag right out of the gate, and use a couple different metaphors there, I guess. And that is that Patreon has reversed their decision. They are not going to make any changes to their fee structure. And so if you didn't want to pay the $1 because you didn't want to pay the extra 38 cents or whatever, which, like I said, we'll talk about it later. It's fine. Well, you can't really hear it. Well, maybe you can hear the sound of my voice until the end of the month, but you don't have to give up. You don't have to, you can come back if you want. Okay. But that fee change will not be happening. Patreon will operate as usual, which is fine with me. But like I said, we'll talk more about that later. And of course, if you subscribe to the Sovereign Tech newsletter, you got issue 10 just a couple days ago as of this release. And of course, I am recording this on a Wednesday because it's your Wednesday Q&A. I'm recording it on December 13th, 12,017 HE. How about that? Got a human era calendar right behind me, or a Holocene era as it's more accurately called. But so boy, and Wednesday, wow, tomorrow night, I am finally going to see The Last Jedi. I have amazingly, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I have amazingly, really kept myself from reading the reviews. I've kept myself pretty spoiler free. It's easy to do when you are, when I find myself only frequenting, say, on the internet, areas where like the Sovereign Tech Uncensored group or the our Sovereign Tech on Reddit, that way, places where there's not a bunch of people who don't get it or whatever, or I mean just places that are a little a little more within the Dunbar number, right, that I can kind of control the flow of information that I see better. So I've not that I'm one, not that if I saw a spoiler, I wouldn't freak out, but so many people, especially people that I respect, have said, look, don't read into the spoilers for this, because it's just going to be guaranteed it's going to be way more enjoyable if you don't know, or it's going to be way more shocking or something like this. And so I was like, all right, you know what, fine. For once, I'll go with that. Not that, I mean, like I always say with spoilers, and I'm not going to quote how I always say that people who hate spoilers are terrorists, holding the world's tongues hostage. But what I'm saying is that I still have to see the movie. It doesn't matter if I know, I still need to go see it. It really doesn't make any difference to me or what I'm going to do, whatever. But it sounds like there's some secrets involved with The Last Jedi, which great. Maybe now that these secrets are out, finally Disney can pick up the fucking pace with these books and stop bullshitting with these penny ante stories and everything that are really getting tiresome. I mean, I'm really at a breaking point with a lot of Star Wars tie-in media. Tie-in, that's such an interesting new word. But anyway, we'll save all that for the Star Wars update that'll be coming for patrons as well. So, all right, going to open this up actually with kind of a sad announcement. I mean, not like a deathly sad announcement, but Classic Shell, which is a project that's been going for about 10 years, which Classic Shell was a way to, starting on Windows 8 particular. Well, actually, I think it started maybe with Windows 7 even. But with Windows 8 particularly, you could, and Windows 10, of course, it worked for that as well. You could replace that really weird start menu, especially in Windows 8, or you could bring the start menu back like Windows 8 originally didn't have until they brought on 8.1, and even then it was kind of odd. Classic Shell allowed you to bring, to have that classic start menu again. It also allowed for some adjustments to the File Explorer and everything else. I mean, it's a really beautiful, simple, highly customizable piece of software that I think for a lot of people ever since Windows 7 has kept people on Windows because it's kept their sanity, okay, in the midst of the changes that has happened over, ever since Windows 8, really, the dramatic changes that have happened that Microsoft has done with the Windows operating system since then. And don't worry, we're not going to be talking Windows for long. This isn't the Microsoft show at all, quite the opposite. But anyway, this is really kind of sad. And because what it allowed for, Classic Shell allowed you to, bring back the classic start menu. You could bring back the start menu from Windows 7. You could bring back even the one from Windows Vista. You could have like the arrow features built into it. You could bring back the one from Windows 2000. You could bring back the one from Windows XP. You had all these kind of options. However you wanted Windows to work, you could put that on there and it would work. In fact, me personally, I set it for Windows 2000 because I still say to this day, Windows 2000, was perfect. It had all the, like NTFS advancements and a lot of the security advancements that were a major part of Windows XP and that Windows XP introduced to the world. But then it was lightweight. It was, almost as lightweight as Windows 98 was in comparison to, say, Windows XP, which now it would be considered crazily, lightweight, Windows XP, that being. But Windows 2000 was way more lightweight. I loved it. That was such a slick, even like the sounds that Windows 2000 would make, like that Utopia sound scheme. Oh, man, that was great shit. So anyway, I would use Classic Shell across the board. Not that I can say much for Windows 8. I completely skipped Windows 8, and I just stuck with Windows 7. Fortunately, I don't get a lot of people asking me Windows 8 questions because I don't know how good of an answer I could give you because I just said, fuck it. I have no interest in it. And, my gaming rig at the time, which was my main machine for those years, had no problem, running Windows 7, and Windows 7 was, there were no clear advantages for running Windows 8 or 8.1 even as compared to running Windows 7. Even though I know Windows 8 technically ran slimmer and ran lighter than Windows 7 did. As to where between Windows 7 and Windows 10, I think it's definitely gotten to the point where there are, not that you need to run Windows 10, but it's gotten to the point where Windows 7, or where there are advantages to running Windows 10. There are features that you can do. And I don't want to get into a huge conversation around that, or like, why is it better to run Windows 10 than, say, Windows 7? Not even going to go there. Okay. That if you really want to know, you can ask me about that, if you want me to make the case for such a thing. But, and it's not just because of UWP either, even though that's definitely one of the major parts of it anyway. So Classic Shell was really great. Because with Windows 10, there's advantages there's things I want to take advantage of in Windows 10, but if the start menu wasn't the start menu from at least Windows 7, I had no interest. I didn't want to be a part of it. Okay. And so as long as I've been using Windows 10, I've been using Classic Shell until recently, as I've been using my Asus ZenBook 3 as kind of my little media machine as I'm going around as needed. With that, I said, all right, you know what? Here we go. We got a clean version of Windows here. We're going to run everything clean on this. And I talked about this in a recent, episode 254, where I went on that whole tirade that everybody loved about Blu-ray players or Blu-ray software. I want this just super clean experience, totally quote unquote legit experience. And let's see just what the advantages are to running so legit. So anyway, I've been using the stock Windows 10 start menu, as it were, or menu's a fine term. It's really there's a whole lot going on with that menu. And I've gotten used to it. And it didn't actually, if you're using UWP, you've really got to be buying into everything that Windows 10 is selling you. Okay. When you're using UWP and those live tiles within the start menu can actually do shit. And if you add in a couple shortcuts, like a shortcut to the control panel, because normally it just takes you to settings and it's a pain in the ass to get to the control panel. You add in a shortcut like that and a couple other things. It's not that bad, even on a small screen. Frankly, it's kind of nice based upon, so let me say why. And this falls under why there's advantages to using Windows 10 as compared to Windows 7. With Windows 10, and this is going to become more true as, we talked about in episode 255 of Sovereign Tech Prime, where we were talking about the always connected PCs. You really are at the point where almost everything that you could want to do on a smartphone, you could do on in a desktop environment with Windows 10. With the same apps, Instagram, whatever, with the same apps that you would use on your smartphone. It's not like you're I'll use this alternative. No, you're actually using the fucking apps. So then you have, of course, the full library, the impressive library of Win32 software, that's been around for decades that you can take advantage of at the same time. So, it's very much a total package and far superior, to what any smartphone could even dream of doing by leaps and bounds. So, so with that in mind, if you're using things that way, then suddenly those live tiles in that start menu makes a lot of sense. But that's the mindset you've got to go at it with, you can get rid of all the live tiles. You can make it to where it is just more or less a regular start menu. You could really get it to that point with some shortcuts or something built in or whatever, So Classic Shell, with it going away, it's sad. And like I said, there's a lot of people who I think for them, this is what was keeping them in the Windows ecosystem, quite frankly. Like really, because it allowed them to just still use Windows like, they have been using it for the past 20 years, and it's going away now. Now, I think that he opened it up and people could just take over for him, but he's not going to actively develop it anymore. And the reasons that he said he's not going to, I just want to cover these quick. He said that he just has a lack of free time to do it. So that's number one. Number two is Windows 10 is being updated way too frequently, twice a year, and each new version changes something that breaks Classic Shell. And three, each new version of Windows moves further away from the classic Win32 programming model, which allowed room for a lot of tinkering. The new way things are done make it very difficult to achieve the same customizations. And so those are both solid points on his part. Like we said, when Windows, or like I've said, when there's the fall creators update or the anniversary update, whatever update, twice a year at least that they happen for Windows 10, you are getting an entirely new operating system. You're really not just using Windows 10. And this just highlights that he has to fix it, do major code revisions every twice a year, which is probably, turns it into a real chore, as to where before, maybe there'd be a Surface Pack every couple of years, Surface Pack, did I say that? A Service Pack, a Service Pack 1, Service Pack 2, every couple of years or something, and that wasn't so much to have to deal with. Now, I can imagine that's really a pain, so I totally understand that. The other point he's making about how it's getting away from the Win32 model, yeah, and UWP and progressive web apps and all that, they are definitely going to, or at least Microsoft's trying to make that the future of Windows. We'll see how far that goes, what that all ends up shaking out as, in the end. I'm not going to comment on that, but there's definitely some reality. In fact, one of the things that's actually held up my game development, aside from just having an insane schedule throughout 2017, which 2018, that is going to stop. That insane schedule is not going to be a part of the program. But one of the things that's held up game development for Hyperchronius 2 and others, I just said others. Anyway, what's holding that up is I want it to work within the Microsoft Store, but I don't want to just use a Centennial Bridge. I want it to be natively available in there. And then, it can be done, but I want these things to be as cross-platform as possible. So that's taken on a whole other philosophy. And, the lack of Win32 or the continuing lack of support and push away from Win32 is something that I want to be really on top of myself. So anyway, let's, all right. So Classic Shell is gone. There's alternatives, and it's not like you can't still use Classic Shell. And I imagine somebody's going to pick up the ball and run with it. Okay, other options are going to exist. But that said, the live, or the start menu that you get with Windows 10 right out stock isn't that bad. Like, I mean, I don't want to say it's great. It's great if you have the mindset for it, where you want to be getting, where you want it to be a quick shot of a lot of different information, say notifications, even more so than the notification center on the right-hand side of Windows 10. But, even if you don't want that mindset, it's still not bad. And the less software you install, as always, of course, is a good thing. Software minimalism is very important. So for security anyway. So now, while speaking of security, let's change gears here. Actually, we're going to go to, I got a question asked, a question for the show. Do you know / suggest TPM modules? TPM modules are trusted platform modules, or I think he just said, he said TPM modules, because I was going to say I'm repeating myself. But TPM just stands for Trusted Platform Module. We'll talk about what that is in just a second. Was reading a bit about how these trusted platform modules are pretty much necessary to run BitLocker correctly. Not sure if they work with Veracrypt. Haven't looked that far. Okay. So TPM, we're going to call them TPM modules. Fuck it. I'm not just going to call them TPMs. TPM modules is, and look, I am a huge fan. Understand this. I am a huge fan of hardware solutions where you come up, not where just the software is doing the securing, but where you come up with a hardware security solution. And that's really what TPM was, which it was first thought up back in 2009. You have the Trusted Computer Group, TCG. It's their standard that they're an independent body, more or less, even though they deal with a lot of the tech giants and everything. They're big on, they have an entire philosophy really called trusted computing, which is where, your hardware is locked down before software even gets involved. Not a bad ethos at all. People raise a lot of red flags about TCG, and I understand those. Okay. So in the abstract, I think that TPM modules are a great idea in the abstract. In application, I feel a little bit differently about this. Now, to answer kind of the last question about Veracrypt. So Veracrypt is my number one recommended, and right now, in my opinion, the premier disk encryption, hard disk encryption software out there, unless, you're using what's automatically baked into, various versions of Linux, Ubuntu or something like that. That's pretty great too. But also, Veracrypt can do more than that. Veracrypt can create, encrypted containers, within your operating system. I mean, there's a lot of advantages to it. Huge fan of Veracrypt. Veracrypt does not support TPM. They will not support TPM. They've come right out and said it. They have very real concerns over, so myself, again, like I said, I agree with TPM modules in the abstract, that there's this, chip that you add on, or that comes with your computer out of the gate, that you add on to the motherboard. And then you have this, you're securing everything, pretty much right as you boot up the computer. Okay, before you're even getting to the operating system and everything. Like I said, it's a great idea, okay? I mean, in the abstract. But in implementation, I have a lot of concerns, and especially with kind of the philosophy of what a lot of people would want to do with a module like this, okay? For example, so, and there have already been exploits against TPM that are a major problem. And let me answer this quick, too. You asked about BitLocker, which is Microsoft's, what they built into Windows 10. So for BitLocker to work, BitLocker can take advantage of TPMs, of TPM modules, but BitLocker can work beautifully if you're using a solid state hard drive. Okay, like but you have to, for BitLocker to really work that wonderfully. So those are kind of your two options for BitLocker to work 100%. Is it either has a TPM module, on your motherboard, or you are, and they're already looking into how can we bake it right into the processor, more or less, if they're not already doing that. So I might be a little behind on my info with that one, but, or you could do it as long as you have a solid state drive. Like there's functionality, built into, not really built into the NAND, but built into solid state disks that allowed for that, or that allows for, BitLocker to work all the way. So, those are a couple things to keep in mind as far as BitLocker goes. Anyway, so TPM, the concerns around TPM is that you don't really, especially TPM, from TCG, okay, from the Trusted Computer Group, you don't have actual control of the private keys. Okay. Like you don't have actual control of that module. So that module could be used and could be rewritten and, modified effectively to do just about anything. And it could be used to reinforce DRM. It could be used to enforce software licenses, kind of the same concept. It could even be used for gaming. It could be used to to recognize there will be a digital signature, say, some kind of hash that the TPM has to recognize. And if you didn't get the latest Assassin's Creed from the right source, it's going to know, and it's going to fuck up your video game, maybe that you torrented or something like that. So yeah, I mean, there's very real, and they're not theoretical. There's very real concerns around what could be done with TPM. So I'm not necessarily a fan. Like I said, I'm not a fan of TCG's TPM. The idea in the abstract, I'm a huge fan of, but you got to open it up, and they don't open it up. That's the my opinion, really the number one critique is that you don't have access really to the private keys involved. That they burn right into the circuit. You don't. And that's another thing too, is that supposedly they burn the private key effectively right into the circuit, right? But you're really trusting the manufacturer to do that, that they're not going to keep a copy of the private key and then they could hand that over to whoever, which, back in 2015, I mean, with one of the Snowden revelations, I forget exactly which one, but they admitted that they were able to get the private keys from TPMs just based, or effectively the with the Infineon chips or with the Infineon hardware in particular, Infineon implementations, I guess maybe be the best terms. That the CIA was able to actually use TPM to get access to computers, which is the exact opposite of what TPM is supposed to do. It's not supposed to give people access. It's supposed to keep them out. So yeah, no, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. Fan of the idea. Again, fan of the idea in the abstract, but the implementation, no, not good. So that's, I hope that answers that. My thoughts on TPM there. I mean, we could really deep dive, into how it's all set up, but just in the abstract, and there's real world cases where the TPM has failed really across the board. Like I said, I mean, TCG, I'm not saying that TCG is some kind of evil group. Just they are, keeping closed some of the most important parts of what makes up their ideas for trusted computing. And that's a problem. I mean, eventually, open source solutions will come into fruition for this sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, that's going to require, though. I mean, why isn't there already open source TPM and stuff like this? People are working on it. Part of the reason, though, is that you have to have open hardware for it to work. Like there's this really tight integration between TCG and companies like Infineon and AMD and a whole slew of others. I mean, this is really, it's a very close relationship where they're sharing secrets with each other. And I'm not saying there's inherently something malicious about that. I'm just saying that an open source solution can't exactly do that without getting a lot of keys to the kingdom that are technically trade secrets, industrial secrets, whatever. So I don't expect that to happen. Only if we ever get to really serious not just open source software, but where we get to open source hardware, which is definitely something being worked on right now. So anyway, we'll see. Maybe in the future. Okay, so let's get into a couple of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin related questions here. So the first one is, let's see, I'd love to hear your thoughts on getting into stuff early. I know I'm not the only one that got into things like Bitcoin way too early. This is becoming a recurring thing in my life. Okay, so I'm guessing you meant I mean, I think the first thing that probably runs through everybody's head, what do you mean how do you get into Bitcoin way too early? I'm guessing maybe you mean that, you got in early, but then you cashed out when it was only at $15 or something like that. I know some people who, boy, and not because they needed to, they cashed out when it was $60 because they thought, okay, yeah, this is as good as it's going to get. And they cashed out a lot. I mean, I know the stories. I know them personally. And wow, and I don't know if there's such a thing as, I mean, there is such a thing as too early. There's an idea of like releasing a product too early, but that's wholly different from like what was going on with Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin didn't come into existence too early. But it had all the signs. So this is a tough question to answer. So it had all the signs of, that it was going to be something that could last. Okay. You had a conservative development team. You had a lot of very conservative moves. You had lack of a figurehead, like a company that could be attacked or shut down or bought out or something like that. I mean, you had a million things going right for it that, at least for me, and I don't know if I could even quantify or list them all off, where, and this isn't anything new. I mean, I've talked about Bitcoin for years now, be it on Sovereign Tech or Free Talk Live or whatever, and I've said that it's going to be something to last. I said that, it might not end up, 100 years from now, it might not still be king, but it's, it's out there, it's happening, okay? It's and it's going to be around for a long, long time. I wish I love this question, but I wish I could answer it better, because I'm trying to think of everything that makes something really what tells me that it's made to last, because it's what I look for with anything, is something I don't want flashes in the pan. I mean, with cryptocurrencies, there's kind of a couple ways you can invest in them, right? And people can come out and say the phrase, well, it's all speculation. Not exactly. There's certainly plenty. I mean, like Ethereum is pure speculation. It has no actual practical use case. But there's a lot of, there's a lot of things that actually do have practical use cases where really it's not just speculation. Okay, this stuff can actually work. Zcash, Zencash, those, Bitcoin, of course, itself, have actual practical application. It's not like it's just speculation. Like the value is pretty inherent of what can be done with it. So, there's a couple ways that you can invest in crypto. You can get on top of what is now popularly called an ICO, or, in the past was, like when a coin, when a new cryptocurrency would first come out, and you could buy it, you could get it on release day, you could get a bunch of it, and there would be a spike because everybody would be excited about it. And generally, you would get excited about it because maybe it announced some kind of very interesting feature set. And then within 24 hours, it may not intentionally be a pump and dump, but it would feel like a pump and dump. And within 24 hours, all the early investors would triple whatever they put in, and they would cash out. And then, the new cryptocurrency would either tank completely and never come back, or it would try to move on, or, who knows what exactly would happen with it. So, you can get in it then, or the other way to get into cryptocurrency is to buy a ton of it and just hold and hope, hodl and hope, right? Like hold on to it and just hope that in 2, 3, 4 years, whatever, that it'll actually skyrocket, that it'll actually take off. For example, Litecoin right now is doing phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal is hardly even the proper word for it. And people are very excited about where Litecoin's going to go, what's going to happen with it. And I myself, obviously, I want to get very, braggadocious and say, well, what if I said to people, what has been in my top 4 cryptos, or top 5 cryptos every time for years now, for the entire 5-6 years that Sovereign Tech has been running. Litecoin has always been there. It is always the one that I mention after Bitcoin. I say, like right now, my top picks are easily Bitcoin, Litecoin, Zcash, Zencash, and really I could stop there, but there's in the number 5 spot, you have kind of a toss up between, and I'm not really a big fan of Dash, but you kind of have a toss up between, like Monero or NEM or something, New Economy Movement or something like that, which all those I think are pretty interesting. Okay. So, I keep it very conservative. I mean, and kind of the number 4 and number 5 spot, change hands here and there, but those top 3, at least ever since Zcash came around, has been really solid. And Zencash is, yes, they're a Sovereign Tech sponsor, full disclosure, but I allowed them to be a sponsor because I believe in what they're doing. I believe in what they've got going on. So So, or, you can just hold on to those. You can buy in early and you can just hold, set and forget and like not think about it and then come back in a few years and away you go. I mean, this is a major, kind of business suggestion, trick, I guess, maybe more particularly, not trick, recommendation. I don't know. Tactic that I think a lot of people forget is you got to think, if you want to make serious money, and in fact, serious money with maybe not a whole lot of work, you've got to think really long-term. And even if it requires a ton of work, you've got to think really long-term. Okay. If, like with this show with Sovereign Tech, if I was like, first couple of years, I can't crack, more than a couple hundred or 300 listeners a week. What the fuck? Why would I stick with this? This is terrible. It's not getting where I want it to go. I can't get advertisers, blah, blah, blah. It just takes time. You got to think long term. And I knew that what I was building, I knew what was going on. And so then, you get to year 5 and then suddenly, you have your listener numbers are in the 5 digits. People got to get out of this mindset of I got to make money in 6 months. It almost, it can work that way. The way that you can make money early on. Okay. And I'm not an investor. I'm not necessarily giving investment advice. I'm sharing experience. The way you can really make money early on is there's the old saying, you have to have money to make money. Yes. That's how you make money early on. In the long term, you don't have to have money to make money. In the long term, you can do it for practically nothing, and your practically nothing can turn into something amazing inside of 5-10 years. But you've got to be willing to put in that kind of time. And I get it. Humans have limited lifetimes. Not everybody wants to think that way, but we don't think that way to our detriment, in my opinion. For a lot of reasons, we don't think long-term to our detriment. I could get into a huge philosophical diatribe around that, as to we're never thinking the long-term. And it's 10 times worse with social media and shit like that. It's 10 times worse. Nobody thinks long-term anymore. So I would argue, I guess, that there really is no such thing as too early. Maybe the person wants to clarify what they mean by that, but I don't think there's any such thing as too early. There's only getting out too early, like leaving behind too early. And, everybody has different risk tolerances, and I understand that, but yeah, technologies can come out too early, like concepts like Twitter, microblogging platforms and all that, they've come and gone for decades, long before Twitter was a thing. Twitter just happened to be there at the right time. And part of why Twitter was so popular, believe it or not, was because it was really an interaction. Most people don't realize this. Why was Twitter a big deal? It became a big deal because at the time it was right around when smartphones and all that was coming into being, but it was a bridge between SMS and the World Wide Web. That's why Twitter became a thing. Not because the microblogging platform was some kind of revolutionary idea. It wasn't even close. Okay. It's because it created a platform that allowed for that bridge. That's really what took it to the next level. And sure, people were ready for, some kind of like social media platform to happen. In fact, you know what, with Twitter, not to get sidetracked, Twitter, they just announced that they are going to allow for tweet storms officially in the client, on the web and on mobile. It's coming out over the following weeks. If you see a little plus symbol when you go to press to tweet and it gives you the options, if one of them is a plus symbol, that means you've got the ability to do tweet storms now, where it's like a threaded tweet and you can make really long tweets. I'm telling you, Twitter, all you got to do, create that group functionality like Facebook has, and we can all leave Facebook together and just say, fuck it. But we got to wait for that. So anyway, in fact, I tweeted about this the other day. I've really, with Twitter, I've come to the conclusion, like I've been trying to figure out what finally cracked them. Was it just to copy Facebook? What made them want to go to the 280 character limit? I'll tell you, I wouldn't be surprised. I say this in half jest. I wouldn't be surprised if the reason that they came up with the 280 character limit is because foreign policy and domestic policy by U.S. President President Trump. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about, Big Orange. This guy was making like scary inside of 100, 120, 140 characters, whatever, was making scary policy decisions and really was making foreign policy. And I think other countries were reacting based upon his tweets. So Twitter came out and said, holy shit, we got to stop a nuclear war. We've got to give this guy some more breathing room to talk in. And I use the term breathing room very, very specifically. Someone else made that quote, or used that term a lot. But anyway, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually what it was about, is because it was being used as such, like the world was reacting to these tweets, and to allow for, or to get away from the confusion that comes from brevity, they expanded it. So I wouldn't be surprised if just for President, Pizza the Hut, if they expanded the character limit, if they doubled the character limit on Twitter just for him. I could believe it. Really. I know you might think that sounds crazy, but Silicon Valley has plans and designs for how society is supposed to go, and nuclear war would obviously fuck with that. So anyway, I say that in half jest, but really, I don't think it's that unheard of a concept. So, okay, so when is it too early for crypto? I don't think it's too early. And again, there's two modes that I'm sure there's more, but there's at least two modes within which you can invest and get involved in crypto. You can be there day one or day zero even, right? And then cash out on day one. Or, you can hold for the really long term. But the really long term, you've got to stop thinking 2 years. You've got to stop thinking all these dips. It's got to be full risk, and you wait 5 years. That's what it's got to be, And it can be tough, like Dash, right? So when Dash was dark coin, I had no confidence in it because they were failing, and I've brought the story up many times. They were failing all of their technical goals. They failed them with flying colors. Total failure. So I was like, so early on, I was just like, fuck it. I don't have time for this. And I didn't. And I don't necessarily feel bad that I wasn't involved in Dash, because I still think there's other concerns. Okay. But yeah, it did its thing. And now, it's one of the top cryptocurrencies, and it kept on going. Good for them. They thought really long-term. Kudos. Okay. I mean, there's really something for that. Those are the two ways you want to go about it. So yeah, I don't know that there's such a thing as too early. I think that there's the problem of that people aren't willing to go the long term with these technologies. And if you're not willing to go the long term, well, then I guess you just have to deal with the ramifications. But I don't think holding any crypto, if it can last that long, holding any crypto for like 5 years. I mean, and if it goes to zero inside of those 5 years, that's part of the full risk. But holding onto any crypto for 4 or 5 years, I think is a totally valid, wonderful thing to do. I mean, like I have, like with Zencash, I'm thinking really long term, because this is not a flash in the pan. Same with Zcash, same with Bitcoin. Bitcoin, I mean, Litecoin as well. I mean, a lot of people, Litecoin this is a fucking rally. It's amazing, and anyway, so there you have that. But while we're on that subject, okay, of the too early thing, yeah, think really long-term. Do that with everything you're doing. Make that a major part, of your mindset. It's really long-term is part of what I call a galactic mindset. Okay. Which is what I like to think that I have. It's what I like to think that I've nurtured and developed for myself. And the galactic mindset is that I think about things on a literal galactic scale. What does it matter on a galactic scale? And the only thing that actually measures against the galaxy in any meaningful way is the individual. Planet Earth, I measure, how I feel about the planet Earth on a galactic scale as well. But, like everything, any dumbass executive order, any dumbass law, any dumbass technology, whatever that comes around, I always, first and foremost, think about it on a galactic scale. But that also requires thinking on a very long timeline. And that's something that I personally try to foster, and maybe that's something you want to do too. So you might think it sounds cheesy, but if that's what you think, well, then that's what you think. I don't give a shit. All right, so let's go on to the next onto the next bit of Bitcoin business here. So, it's interesting. I mean, obviously I frequent a lot of libertarian and anarchist and ANCAP, I guess, also circles. And there's a pretty major civil war going on, not just between libertarians, but also it's spread out into the crypto space. It's taken life, taken form in the crypto space. And of course, we're talking about none other than Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash, or Legacy Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, or as I like to call it, Bitcoin and Bcash, because Bitcoin Cash is not Bitcoin. It's an altcoin. So, which not a new statement for me. I've been saying it for months on Sovereign Tech. We talked about the 3 Pope problem and all that. But anyway, had a few people kind of ask about this. And I mean, this is like really heating up. Like, I'm seeing some crazy shit. Like people saying, support Bitcoin Cash for our children. Look, and I would be just as critical if people were saying support Bitcoin for our children. The instant you start using rhetoric like that, in my book, you've lost. You're pulling the stunts that the fucking government and the status quo pulls all the time. That, will somebody please think of the children? And look, I think about, I care about kids, obviously, but I sure as fuck don't use it as rhetoric over my investment choices and monetary choices. But I mean, just fuck no. Leave the kids out of this, shall we? But anyway, it's getting pretty nuts out there, and both sides are very much heated up. What I think, in many ways, the actual solution, well, I don't know about solution, but the actual how this is all really going to shape up, I mean, it's just you'll have both. You'll have Bitcoin and Bcash, and they'll get used for different things. They have different development paths, like Andreas Antonopoulos said. It doesn't have to. It's not a zero-sum game. These things can coexist, and I don't understand why they can't coexist. But that's not good enough. And it seems like the person who it's really not good enough for is the CEO, which I can't believe that a cryptocurrency has. Well, okay, yes, they're like Zcash kind of has a CEO, right? But I mean, it's kind of weird to hear Bitcoin having a CEO. That sort of defeats the purpose of what I think of as Bitcoin as being headless. But okay, whatever. If somebody wants to be the CEO of Bitcoin Cash, go for it. Anyway, but the CEO of Bitcoin Cash and the people involved with Bitcoin Cash seem to be very adamant about this is the real Bitcoin. As to where I think really the Bitcoin team would just kind of be, or the Bitcoin core team more specifically, would just be like, whatever, they can call it, because it's not like this is the first time that there's been an altcoin that's called itself Bitcoin, right? Wasn't there Bitcoin Dark, and there have been some others. I mean, it's not necessarily anything new. And, me personally, I've never really, and I've interacted with some of the, Bitcoin core team and whatever, like I've never really seen them even blink at the fact that someone else decides to use the term Bitcoin in their cryptocurrency or something. So it's very much, there is really, it seems like there's a concerted effort on the part of Bitcoin Cash to somehow demolish or denounce and not allow exist Bitcoin. And it's really hitting a fever pitch. Somebody shared, generally, a bright individual, he shared in the Sovereign Tech Uncensored Facebook group this video by a guy who is obviously pro Bitcoin Cash. And wow, it's like a 5-6 minute video. If I think of it, I'll put it in the show notes. Apparently it's very popular. Apparently even Craig Wright himself, who's supposedly Satoshi, no, he's not, is sharing this around as like, this is why we need to support Bitcoin Cash, blah, blah, blah. Oh boy. So I guess I'll give like in response to that, I guess I'll give like a bigger statement on how I feel about Bitcoin versus Bcash. Okay. So Bitcoin is Bitcoin, Bitcoin Core, that's Bitcoin. There's my statement on that. As I've said on Sovereign Tech very openly, Bcash is just that. It's an altcoin straight up. And so the argument that gets made, really the main argument. So why does Bitcoin Cash even exist? Why are people, getting into it? Why are they so against Bitcoin? What's the deal here? So the argument gets made that, to handle the scaling of Bitcoin, the growth of so many people getting involved in it, etc., that you've got to raise the block size limit, right? Okay, so the Bitcoin Core team refuses to do that. And they refuse to do that because they're very seasoned coders, in my opinion, and they want to play things conservatively. Now, I'm not saying you can't have different coding philosophies. You most certainly can. Okay, but I definitely appreciate, especially when so much money is on the line, I certainly appreciate a very conservative coding mindset. Okay, as in we don't just make changes. The example that I always bring up is with the development of Debian Linux. There are massive years-long arguments over adding a wallpaper into Debian Linux. And you think, well, who cares? It's just a picture. No, they care, because security and the security of a whole lot of people and a whole lot of infrastructure and systems is on the line. You don't just go tossing in a picture for no good goddamn reason. Okay, and I think, in my opinion, that's the same way that the Bitcoin Core team thinks about things. And I applaud them for that. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that other crypto can't think differently. This is a great, one of my main reasons that I've argued for Litecoin to exist is to be an experimental blockchain for features that could later be put into Bitcoin. Okay. And and I've been saying that for years. It's not anything new. So, again, I don't mind there being other philosophies. That's fine. I don't mind the fact that Bitcoin Cash exists. My problem is that they seem to want to kill the actual Bitcoin. They seem to want to wipe out the other guy for some weird fucking reason. Now, the weird reasons given, okay, so Bitcoin Cash came into existence because they increased the block size from 1 megabyte, what did they go to 8, whatever, and they did a couple other things to try and fix it. They already have to do a hard fork to fix a bunch of it, but whatever, okay. The main thing seems to be the block size. And yes, the Bitcoin Core team they implemented SegWit, but they do not want to implement a block size increase at this moment. Of course, we had the B2X situation that ended because the miners found out that they didn't actually have all the control of Bitcoin, and that the people, the nodes, perhaps you could say, really have all the control. That's going to be an important point. The failure of B2X even getting off the ground is going to be a very important point to my concerns around Bitcoin Cash, around Bcash here. So, it seems to. So you have the block size increase. Okay, fine. Now the argument seems to be that the reason that there's a conspiracy theory, a literal conspiracy theory, because it doesn't have any evidence, or it has practically no evidence. It has some interesting points to it, but at the end of the day, it really has no evidence. Okay. There is a conspiracy theory that's what's, and I mean, I'm not saying that I'm opposed to this. I'm not saying that it might not be the reality. I'm just saying, let's be clear here that, we have people doing crazy shit, with Bitcoin Cash, based upon very little evidence. Okay. I mean, if not zero evidence. So this conspiracy theory is that Blockstream is behind everything. Blockstream is actually, they're paying off and they're funding the Bitcoin Core development team. And they're hired on their team. They're paying them. They control the purse strings, and they don't want a block size increase because they want all of the development. And this is something this video that I mentioned was bringing up. They want all the development to be done on, all of the the increase, the scaling. They want all the scaling, all the growth to be done on side chains. Okay, not on essentially Bitcoin will be a settlement layer. And everything else that gets done, all the fast payments, buying coffee with crypto and all that different stuff will be done on side chains, not on the Bitcoin blockchain itself at all times, which is what Bitcoin Cash is trying to be, where it's actually digital money, not just necessarily digital gold, which is what I would say that Bitcoin has become. Okay. So it's basically Blockstream is artificially keeping, holding back Bitcoin by not bringing the block size limit or whatever into it and allowing for more transactions. They're artificially doing that. They're controlling it all, so that way that people have to buy into their technology that they're developing, which is, the Lightning Network, sidechains, and all this. Now, let's be clear here for a few things. One, the Lightning Network is completely open source. Anybody can contribute to it, not just Blockstream. That doesn't make any sense to me. Okay. like that argument alone just doesn't exactly fit the bill. But then the theory goes on to say that what'll happen is that this is going to, Blockstream will eventually replace Bitcoin because they'll get everybody on board with these side chains, which will effectively be IOUs, which will be no different than where Blockstream will become the crypto Federal Reserve. And they will be, handing out receipts that supposedly have backing in, say, the Bitcoin settlement layer. Very similar to how, supposedly the dollar was based on gold for a while, with the Federal Reserve and everything. So that's the claim, is that Blockstream is pulling off pretty much what the Federal Reserve did. Here's the thing. With what the Federal Reserve did, it's extremely well documented. It's open, to a very real degree. You can read about it. It's not conspiracy theory. And I've brought this up many times, and you can read one of the best books on the subject, that being The Creature from Jekyll Island, by J. Edward Griffin. And, he'll tell you right in there, these were people who thought they were doing a good thing. They weren't evil. They weren't malicious in what they were trying to do with the Federal Reserve. They thought these were very high-minded individuals. They thought that this is how they were going to, kind of steer society or something like that. Okay. So keep that in mind for one. But also, just like I mentioned with the Lightning Network, look, anybody can actually contribute to the Bitcoin Core code. It's not like it's just the core dev team. And seriously, I know, people I personally know who have contributed to the Bitcoin Core code. Yeah, it's a very conservative and drawn out process to get added into it, but anybody can develop into Bitcoin Core. I don't think that that's necessarily true for Bitcoin Cash. I could be mistaken on that part, but that's not even the point. My point in bringing it up that anybody can contribute to Bitcoin Core is that it debunks this conspiracy theory. Okay. Or at least it plays against the conspiracy theory, maybe not debunks it. All right. So, but this is the thing, is that this whole idea that Blockstream is somehow controlling Bitcoin and steering it in a certain direction, there's supposition, but supposition isn't necessarily evidence. There isn't evidence for this. That's a big problem. Okay. Everybody's talking about, and then, in this video, it makes one really interesting point, in the video that really struck me at first. And that is, it makes a claim that the CEO of the parent company of Blockstream is a guy that is the chairman for the Bilderberg Group. Now, when the video makes that claim, I'm half tempted to play the audio in this just so you can hear it. When the video makes that claim, I just go, wait, what? Blockstream has a parent company? It has investors. I didn't know it had a parent company. A parent company is a very specific thing. A parent company is like Alphabet to Google, right? Like Alphabet owns Google, owns YouTube, owns all that, and they all turned into, run in some ways like their own company, but Alphabet is really the one that kind of gets the final say in all this. Now, that's wholly different from an investor. Okay, so now the guy that they're actually talking about, and in the video they don't name the names, they don't name the company, they don't. But the instant they said that Blockstream had a parent company, I was like, Blockstream has a parent company, and so I started looking into this. I can't find any evidence that Blockstream has a parent company. What the hell is this guy talking about? Well, they don't have a parent company at all. Okay, the video's wrong. What they have is, they have investment firms that have invested into Blockstream. Sure, there's a few of them. Some of them are very questionable, like I think 21 and some others, which, that has connections to Google. But the main one, the one they must have been talking about, because again, they didn't say the name, because really this whole video is some kind of crazy shill job for Bcash that is just unbelievable. The one they're talking about is a company, or is an investment firm called Exa. Okay. And the guy that they're talking about, who is the CEO of AXA, or at least he was until September of this year of 2017, is Henry DeCastries. If I'm not pronouncing his name right, I don't give a shit. I'm sure he's an asshole. Okay. I'm not saying I like the guy or anything. But Henry DeCastries, sure, he has been, I think in 2010 and in 2017, he was the chairman of the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group. Okay. Now, without getting into a huge conversation around the Bilderberg Group, I don't even want to go there. Okay. because that's a whole other conversation that has some truth to it and that has a lot of bullshit to it as well. And it is, at the end of the day, it's really it's completely meaningless, in fact, to even really talk about. But regardless, okay, so here's this guy who is an investor. He's a CEO of a company that invested in Blockstream. Okay, now you could say, well, the investors have investors have influence in a company, don't they? Haven't you said that before, Stallion? Isn't this true? Sure, of course they do. What are investors, but why do investors invest in a company? To make money, right? Okay. So AXA sees, this sidechain thing, this might be a thing. This Bitcoin thing's kind of running. Tim Draper's involved. We got some big names involved. All right, let's invest in this. This looks like a deal. Let's do that. We'll make some money off of it. It's that simple. There doesn't have to be some kind of wild conspiracy. There just doesn't. It's just, okay, they want to make some money. That's what investment firms do. To say nothing of the fact that the CEO of Blockstream is Adam fucking Back. Now, I get it. A lot of people who, I've met so many people who still haven't heard of this term or who just started hearing of this term because of Bitcoin. The term is cypherpunk. Now, in any time that I have a speaking engagement or if someone needs an about me or something like that for a story or whatever, okay, because I get quoted in a lot of stuff, and that's fine. And if they want to put an about me, great. I always put that I have been involved in the cypherpunk community since the 90s. Okay? That's, I put that there because, and it's not boast. It's just saying I've been around. I know this score. I was, in fact, even when I was at the Manage conference in October, which I did a review for that on Patreon, I got introduced to a lot of people. It's like, look, he was a cypherpunk before people even knew, or before Bitcoin was even a thing. Yeah, I got the proper introduction. Okay, and good. Thank you for the respect. I appreciate that. I don't demand it, but I thank you for it. Okay, so Adam Back, understand, has been a hero, okay, for a long time in the cypherpunk space. I mean, this is the guy, Hashcash. I mean, you could go down the list. I mean, this guy is cypherpunk extraordinaire. If someone gave him the title cypherpunk #1, I don't think that'd be too crazy of a title to hand over to him. Not that cypherpunks care for titles. So and people could say, well, maybe Adam Back's changed his mind. Maybe now he's the shill. He's a shill for the legacy system, for the banking cartels, for whatever. I mean, I guess I can't say that it's impossible, but that's so fucking unlikely. I mean, that's like, I can't imagine it. I get it. People can raise questions like, well, is Snowden actually working for the CIA? Whatever, pick your term of the guy, the whistleblower or something. Is Julian Assange actually working for GCHQ? Whatever. I mean, you can make those claims, and some interesting claims could get made about that, and maybe. But Adam Back working for the system, like it's just an unbelievable concept. I mean, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's so unbelievable that that's what's going on with that. That's very hard to believe. So you've got that, as well. And, just to compare CEOs here, if your claim is that really, Blockstream is controlling Bitcoin, well, who's the CEO controlling Bitcoin Cash? Roger Ver? And now look, and he's apologized, and I appreciate that. And I've met Roger a few times, and, he's been a fairly nice guy and everything. Okay. But I'm just saying, this is a guy who, like, we know, you can claim that Adam Back's a shill, but you don't really have any evidence for that. You can find where there seems to be some shilling going on. Like, remember that classic MT Gox video with Roger Ver saying everything's fine? That was really creepy. Come on. And look, if you want to talk about incentives, really, like if you want to talk about incentives with Bitcoin Cash, I mean, let's start talking about the actual problems with Bitcoin Cash. We can do that, but suffice it to say, that conspiracy, the Blockstream conspiracy theory, It's just that. And the evidence is found wanting. Like, it barely exists, if it exists at all. Again, it's supposition, sure. And hey, look, human beings, sometimes all we have is a feeling to go on. I understand that, and I'm not, necessarily going to begrudge anybody doing that. But, if people are getting this hot and bothered about it, and if Bitcoin Cash is trying to destroy Bitcoin or overtake it or whatever, I mean, then we really need to look at the facts, and we can't be running off of feelings here. If we're talking about, thrashing thousands upon thousands, potentially millions of dollars, and then, the market cap, billions of dollars, then we really need to have some evidence-based, shit going on here. And that conspiracy theory there's no evidence. Unless, if you know some evidence, you send it my way. And I always happily admit when I'm wrong. Okay. I like being wrong because, believe me, I dark shit in my head. So anyway, so let's talk about the problems with Bitcoin Cash itself, really, in all of this. The number one problem is the reason that it exists. That being, they wanted to increase the block size. Now, the reason that Bitcoin Core doesn't want to increase the block size, okay, is because, I'm sure there's a million reasons, but one of them, and I think why a lot of people support the Bitcoin Core team in not increasing the block size, is because when you start increasing the block size to crazy amounts, because, why stop at 8 megabytes? Just fucking, in fact, wasn't that Bitcoin Unlimited or something that said, well, we'll just let it be whatever it needs to be? It could be 100 megabytes, it could be a gig. Who the fuck cares? Like that's kind of really, once you start increasing it, and look, I think Bitcoin Core eventually is going to increase the blockchain size, or the block size, not the blockchain size. Well, that increases the blockchain size, but I think they're eventually going to do it. Okay. But I think eventually they will, but regardless, they're not right now. They're playing it conservative. Again, that's fine with me. So here's the problem. When you increase the block size, you lose decentralization. Okay, that's that's part of the reason I like to think why the Bitcoin Core team is not wanting to just willy-nilly increase the block size, because they know that you're going to lose one of the beautiful aspects of Bitcoin is that you lose decentralization. And it would appear that at least some of Bcash, it appears that at least some of their cheerleaders don't seem to have a problem with this. In fact, Craig Wright, that asshat again, he came out and said that, because everybody talked about how, look, if you with it being at 8 megabytes, right, in very short order, either people who want to be a node, not even mining, and the mining is centralized enough, and you want to talk about ugly incentives. I was going to mention this earlier. You want to talk about crazy incentives. How about the fact that, they wanted all their little ASIC hardware to keep being valuable, and so they created a Bitcoin that could work with that ASIC hardware, right? But not even going there. Okay. If you want people to be able to control a node, which you would argue would be important, because look, the ledger that is Bitcoin, that is like the contract of the economy saying that, okay, I can verify that what happened actually happened right here by myself if I wanted to. Are most people going to run a node? Probably not, but the option should exist. And a lot of people that are real enthusiasts and are really on board with this stuff, or say they want to really secure their shit using the Armory wallet or something like that, yeah, they're going to. They don't care if it's 150 gigabytes or if it's 200 gigabytes or if it gets, approaches a terabyte or something like that. Okay? But, either people are going to have entire fucking data centers in their closets, or, they're not going to be able to be a node, and they're going to have to trust pretty much, some centralized miners really with this. Now, the irony is that I was just going to quote Craig Wright. Craig Wright came out and said on Twitter, he says, that's all right. He says, the legacy the modern financial system that we have has like some 60,000 data centers, and it does fine. And it's like, that comment, do I have to spell it out? That comment is so nuts. That's effectively saying that the modern banking system is decentralized. What? Fuck no. That's why there's Bitcoin, because this shit's not decentralized enough. And look, we know that if you only have 60,000, let's call them nodes, shall we, for the modern financial system. And obviously it goes kind of beyond that when you get into, banking cartels, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But let's talk about that. Obviously, governments can coerce, or at least a lot of power can be centered on these 60,000 nodes of the modern financial banking system, or the modern financial system. You obviously, the one thing should be clear: if that number is accurate, that there are 60,000 data centers controlling the financial system as we know it today, then Bitcoin needs 1 million nodes at least. You've got to best that, because obviously that's the low bar of where there is a central point of failure and where control can be pointed at. And at the rate at which Bitcoin Cash plans on growing, okay, and at the rate that all that's going to end up going, you're going to end up with what looks very much like, the 60,000 data centers of the modern financial banking system or financial system. That's a problem, folks. And look, this isn't like theoretical. This is exactly what has to happen. Not everybody, people can't have a data center in their fucking closet. They can, however, very easily afford 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte drives. Yes, you can afford that. I got an 8 terabyte drive from a Sovereign Tech listener. You know how much it cost them? $150. 8 terabytes. You get me? Yeah, people can afford to do that. They could pop it in their computer or, whatever, however they want it, they need to make it run. It's a whole hell of $150 is a whole hell of a lot cheaper than running a goddamn data center in your house. Just so that, so that you can verify what's going on with Bitcoin Cash, just so you can actually have some say in the goddamn matter, and so on. Nodes are what secure all this shit. And if you want to leave the security to centralized forces, which the government can easily point at, especially if there's only like 60,000 or maybe even less, hey, you've got real problems here. Now, I'm just scratching the surface. But I think the centralization issue is number one. And Bcash is in many ways, and seemingly the people that even support it don't mind if it's centralized. I think that's a very real problem. I know there are people who I've talked to, over the years that are kind of like Bitcoin maximalists, right, or what I call Bitcoin monogamous, that have said that sooner or later it is going to have to get somewhat centralized. That decentralization can't be like this hardcore stance that you hold. I disagree with that. But I'm just saying it's not like this is a new attitude or anything. And look, I'm not saying that there's some kind of nefarious forces behind Bcash or whatever. I am saying that I think they're wrong. And I do think that I think it's very ugly the way that they're trying to replace, like that they even want to in name have Bitcoin Cash be Bitcoin. Just Bitcoin. They don't want it to be called Bitcoin Cash anymore. They just want it to become Bitcoin. I think that there's so many problems with all this. And, this is the thing, because I'm not ignoring that Bitcoin Core has some very real problems. It does. Okay. I don't know that on-chain scaling, which is what Bitcoin Cash wants to do, toss everything onto the blockchain. Again, there's centralization problems when you do that. I don't know that that's the solution ever. I have no problem with SegWit. Lightning Network, this is something, if you've listened to past Q&As, I've talked about this. In fact, I was like, SegWit's fine. SegWit doesn't have to be the Lightning Network. SegWit is just like a compatibility layer, effectively. Okay. But, whatever. There's ways that this can shape up. With the Lightning Network, the only part that makes it like really amenable to me is that, again, anybody can take advantage of it. Anybody can use it, not just one, company. But here's the thing. because this is the other argument that, that they're bringing up is that, well, but we can't really, and everybody's talking about the high transaction fees. And look, I know, I sent some Bitcoin the other day. The transaction fee was $15. It was, but guess what? I also didn't mind. And I'll explain why. Okay. Yeah, fine. You can't use it for the practical purposes, say, of buying a coffee and stuff like that. And that's what Bcash says. It's like, yeah, no, we want to be the digital money. We want to be able to buy coffees with Bitcoin. And so we created Bitcoin Cash, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. Like, the way that things are going with Bitcoin, like this, it's not like this is a new problem. It's not like the transaction fees are somehow new. People didn't care. People saw the value and the continued value, whether they saw this as a problem or not, whatever. Look, I'll take a line from the ANCAPs. The market decides. Okay? Like you can say that you want Bitcoin to be digital money, but what if the market, quote unquote, wants it to be digital gold? What if the market just wants it to be a settlement layer? So, I mean, sure, you can complain and you can go make an altcoin that works as digital money, fine. But don't go, and this is something that I need to get away from too, because I know I've done it. Don't go saying, oh, Satoshi's true vision. Well, actually, you know, I said this a while back. I said, it was like, what is Satoshi? In fact, this is back when, what was it, Bitcoin XT was trying to become a thing. And I said, what is all this argument, you know, using Satoshi? I said, Satoshi's not the Delphic goddamned oracle. That was exactly what I said. And this is still true. Like, there's a very weird appeal to authority going on there that I want to make sure I don't ever fall into. I think there's been points where I have as well, but also, you know, overall, I mean, look, Satoshi's gone, and Bitcoin can be whatever people want it to be and what they need it to be. Really, you know. And I mean, your argument for it in creating Bitcoin Cash as a market force to maybe, you know, steer it in another direction, I don't know, but yeah, I mean, you know, that's a possibility. But my point being is that let's not get into, well, this is what Bitcoin's supposed to be. This is what, I mean, the one thing we know Bitcoin's supposed to be is decentralized. That's the entire point of the fucking blockchain technology. Bitcoin Cash, in my opinion, stands against that. Or at least it's not as decentralized as I think many people hoped. And as many people are still hoping, which is why right now Bitcoin, you know, is at points kissing 20,000, among other reasons. So anyway, we're going really long on this Q&A, and I don't want it to go too much longer. But look, I don't mind. You love Bitcoin Cash. You love it. You have a great time. That is A-OK. All right. And it can exist. And like Andreas said, you know, who good friend, I love the guy. You know, they can coexist. They can do their own thing and be used for different purposes. Fine. Bitcoin can become a settlement layer. Bitcoin can be digital gold. Fine. Bcash can be, you know, digital cash, can be digital money, or, you know, yeah, digital cash, like, you know, for fast transactions, whatever else. Fine. Whatever. The part that's just killing me is this attitude that only one can survive. And the main proponents of that are the guys on the Bcash side. And that is annoying the fuck out of me. And that makes them look like the villain and not like villains in the good way that I like to talk about usually. Really. So anyway, let's talk about the Patreon thing. This is all actually pretty moot to even necessarily bring up, because okay, so what was proposed, and there's a lot of confusion around this, and it seemed like, to me, it really seemed like a very simple email that was sent out by Patreon about 2 weeks ago maybe, that Jack Comte, who I think that's the name of the guy who's the head of Patreon, he said, hey, okay, you know, we want to get, you know, we want there to be like a more consistent payment out to the creators on Patreon. And really a lot of the fees and credit card fees and everything else that we have to deal with makes things very fishy. And, you know, sometimes you don't get the actual amount of money that you were expecting, blah, blah, blah. And so was a proposal that the credit card fees would be offset onto the patrons, not the creators, but the patrons themselves. So if you regularly donated $1, say a month, or $1 per piece of content, those are the two ways that Patreon can be set up. It can be per content or per month. Sovereign Tech is per month. Always been that way, and by design. It couldn't exist any other way, because I just put out too much shit and nobody could like budget. You couldn't budget, you know, for the kind of content that I put out. It's just, it's a bad model for me to do per content. I'm not saying it's a bad model in general. You know, for other people, it works if you have a very set model. But for me, no, there's no plan. You know, I mean, I have plans, of course, and I do plan things out, but you never know. And I like to surprise people when shit hits. So like that's part of the fun of Sovereign Tech. So what would happen is if you put down $1 as a patron per content or per month, they would tack on 38 cents, approximately 38 cents to that dollar. And I think it would be 38 cents, like regardless, like if it was $5, it would be $5.38, I think, as I understand it. Like it really, it was a pretty minuscule amount. Now the concern happened is that when it was per piece of content, then there, you could be adding in tens of dollars of whatever, depending upon the kind of content per month or per pay period, whatever, where people really couldn't budget for what was going on, And so the main concern seemed to be from other creators is that they're going to lose all their dollar creators because now they're going to be charged $1.38. Now, let me be clear, because I've been there. Okay. I know what it's like to where really like $1 could be a lot of money. Into where you have to, if you want to give somebody $1, you're being that gracious, you have to really plan that out. And it has to be exactly $1. And any faltering from that could really fuck up your life. I completely understand that. I am absolutely not being insensitive to that in any fucking way. Okay. And I love every patron, regardless of how much I have patrons that do $25, $20. I have patrons that do $5. I have patrons who only do $1. I have patrons that do $2. Okay. Again, I don't, it's all wonderful. It's all gravy. Okay. It's value for value. I like to think that myself, if you were concerned about the 38 cents that would get tacked on, I would like to think that what I put out there, again, I'm not insulting the fact that you give me $1. It means the world to me. It means the world to me that anybody would pay a nickel for what I do. Okay. But I would like to think that the amount of value I put out every month is easily worth another 38 cents. Again, if you can't budget for that, I understand. If 38 cents will, and I'm not kidding. I'm not being sarcastic. If 38 cents would rock your world in a bad way coming out of your bank account or your PayPal or whatever, then by all means, don't be a patron any longer. That's okay. But you don't have to worry about it because, like I said, it's all moot now because Jack Comte came out and said, all right, we were wrong. I mean, and he wrote a very apologetic letter, but he said, we're wrong. This isn't the right thing to do. We're not going to change the fee structure at all. So you're going to, $1 a buck for the patrons. Okay. I never paid that much attention, honestly. The only thing I pay attention to is, do we get past the reward of $500 to where I start doing, multiple sovereign texts a week, where I start doing 2, sovereign texts a week or whatever. That's the only thing I really pay attention to. I don't, I mean, that money is life-saving money, make no mistake. Okay. That I make on Patreon, but I don't pay that close attention to it, to like, how much am I getting in or something like that. I just don't think about it that way. Okay. But I understand that patrons, some of you may need to. I fucking get it. I so get it. Please, I'm not disrespecting you. I did think that the reaction was a little crazy. Like the reaction from patrons, like, come on. Okay. I mean, well, okay. So let me explain. So if it's per piece of content, yes, I think you have every right to get I totally understand why you're so mad about it. I totally understand, because how can you budget for that? You don't know, I mean, like, and it could come out of nowhere. I totally understand that. Okay. In my opinion, the direction that, cause, and I've said this many times, the internet favors quantity over quality. I like to think I deliver both, but the internet favors quantity over quality. Okay. So people, the direction that creators are going in is quantity. Whatever that quantity is, just get more out. Everything's going that direction, it seems. And however, I think to pay per piece of content, I sort of feel like, and I know there's people who do very well with it, and I respect, and I think that's great. I honestly myself, I mean, like, I'm in the position where, what I want, I mean, and I donate to creators on Patreon. I donate to a few of them. I'm very reticent to donate to one that is a per content model, because I need to budget too. Like I understand. I think the per piece of content, unless it's like videos that come out like quarterly or something like that, I don't know, like you'd have to have a really regular schedule that you'd be aware of. I think that's kind of asking for trouble, unless it's very like, that, okay, there's only one piece of content per month, but then it's just like charging monthly, right? Or if you know that it's only 2 pieces of content per month. But I think for podcasts, there's a lot of them. I mean, I could think of quite a few where, I mean, and I follow them on Patreon, or I'm even their patrons, and like the amount of content that they come out with, you can't charge for that. Like, I mean, like nobody could really schedule for that unless, the person was very wealthy, and, not a lot of people are. So I don't know. I feel like, so maybe people were just freaking out about the per piece of content model that they wouldn't be able to budget for. And that makes sense to me. But otherwise, like if 38 cents is rocking your world, I mean, to some degree, and look, I know, I mean, I think I have patrons, I'm fairly certain, that are like on fixed incomes, and I respect the hell out of that. And I'm honored that I'm a part of that, because I know that like that's life's blood money. That means the world to me. I'm not saying anything otherwise. I'm just saying that, like, if 38 cents is a maybe shouldn't be a patron. I'm not saying for me, I'm saying because because the monthly model, I don't think it was actually a problem. Like I said, where I think it was really a problem was with people who were doing per content. But like if 38 cents is going to rock your world, then don't be a patron for the per content models. I mean, it just, oh man, I don't know. I couldn't believe the backlash that was going on. And people got into, once again, they got into conspiracy theories over what's really going on at Patreon. What's the deal? And look, I think Patreon responded properly. I think Jack Comte came out and this is one of many times where he's come out to like really explain what's happening. And I got to give him credit, because most CEOs, and they're right when he says it, when he says, look, if this is about money I think he's right. I think he's accurate. When the guys at Patreon say, look, if we were just in this for the money, we could have sold the company already and we'd all be millionaires. We're doing this because it's something we care about and we love. And I believe them. I'm inclined to believe them. And things like Patreon are, they're not perfect. I wish they would accept cryptocurrencies, though you could see, boy, talk about fee problems. But regardless, I think things like Patreon are literally changing the world to where creatives can actually make money being creators. And art is just, I've said this before, it's the ultimate expression of the human condition. And to be able to get paid for doing that is amazing. What a wonderful world that we live in. It's weird. I almost feel like there's some kind of like, if I was to believe in a conspiracy theory, I think there's a conspiracy theory against Patreon. I think that, like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's NBC or Disney or whoever, but they don't like the fact that people can be making money. They want to be making the entertainment. They want to be making the creative content. They don't like not being able to control the purse strings of who gets to even make, who gets paid for making creative content and all that. If I was to believe a conspiracy theory, I'd believe it in the other direction, because it seems like every time Patreon does the littlest thing, people freak the fuck out, and there's a lot of voices against it for some reason. I don't know. This is where I think it's literally changing the world. And believe me, for a little while, I mean, like, it seemed like people were so freaking out about this, and maybe that's why I lost some patrons. I don't know. And that's fine. Like I said, I totally understand if you have to budget every penny. Like, I totally respect that and understand that. I'm not mad about it. Okay. And I started looking around for alternatives. What can I eat? What is there? There's got to be, like, Patreon, such a successful model. There's got to be other people doing this sort of thing. And there's one called LibrePay that looked interesting. But here's the thing, is that as a podcaster, particularly, like, if it was other kind of content, I might feel differently about it. But, like, Patreon gives you such granular controls of how the paywall works and what happens when somebody stops paying. Like, they're really ahead of the game in that. And somebody has to, like, so if somebody stops being a patron of Sovereign Tech, when you become a patron of Sovereign Tech, you get a unique podcast feed. that you can put into your podcast app, and you can get the podcast-only episodes, okay? As soon as you stop paying, or as soon as your month is up for where you stop paying, whatever, that feed will no longer feed you new, Patreon-only podcast content or podcasts. And like no one else is doing that. In fact, I think it's a minor miracle that Patreon, I've talked about this many times. I think it's a minor miracle that Patreon was able to pull it off. I think it's the whole reason, because they were able to create these custom feeds, that I have as many patrons as I do. Like, I mean, this is a killer app, understand? And no one else is implementing this. When they do, I'll consider them. Okay. And if they accept Bitcoin or Litecoin or something else, I'll consider them. Or if they accept Zencash, wouldn't that be exciting? Okay, I'll consider them. I'll think about it. But right now, no, I'm not leaving Patreon. I don't know how many times. I mean, I've had to defend against it because I stuck with it when they kicked off Lauren Southern, which I support the fuck out of. I'd kick her off of my platform if I had one in a heartbeat. Okay, I mean, yeah. So don't worry about it. Patreon came out and said they're wrong. You're right. So nothing's going to change, and you can continue your patronage as is. Again, if you did leave and you're like, I don't know how you're hearing this, but if you did leave because of it, I totally understand. Please understand that I understand what it's like to where you have to budget every dollar. And I respect the hell out of that. Okay. And so if you had to leave, I get it. That's fine. If you want to come back, come back. But and if you don't, I mean, you don't. Or if it's because of something, maybe I lost patrons for something completely independent. Maybe I finally said that one crazy thing that just drove people nuts. I don't know. Or maybe the content I was putting out there just wasn't quality enough. If that's true, I'd love to hear from you. Actually, for either reason, I'd love to hear from you. If you think that what I'm putting out isn't up to snuff, it's not quality, it's not worth $1 a month. If what I'm putting out is not worth $1 a month, let me know. Okay? I really want to know that. I'm not being an ass. I'm not being sarcastic or anything like that. I really want to hear from you, and I will respect what you have to say. Okay? So, but otherwise, I mean, we're getting new patrons. Actually, some old patrons came back on, and welcome to you, because, you're always welcome here. Sovereign Tech, I'm a very open guy. I let people live and let live, do what they do. It's the other people and ideologies that don't seem to want to allow people to do what they want to do. But I don't care. You could be conservative, capitalist, you could be a communist, you could be left wing, you could be whatever. It doesn't matter to me, baby. I mean, come on board. As long as you're not interested in killing people, then we've got another problem entirely. But we're here to celebrate life on Sovereign Tech, baby. So thank you so much to everybody for being a patron, a continued patron. I'm glad that Patreon was responsive and listened to the listen to the masses, as it were. I mean, I'm sure they were freaking out like, whoa, we're going to lose all the money if we keep going with this. I mean, the way that people were freaking out, I don't know. Anyway, sometime in the future, maybe someone will do an interesting analysis about it, and we can cover it on the show of what really happened with, during this 2-week period with Patreon. But there you have it. That's it for now. Of course, there'll be more. I had other subjects I was going to get into, but we're not going to be able to get into them. There will be more of the temporary autonomous zone, more chapters, more parts of that will be released throughout this month. Got some other plans for this month. Very exciting. And tomorrow I'm off to see The Last Jedi. Woo! And we've got there's going to be a lot of recording New Relationship Rhombus, review of Clash of Champions that we're going to, and of The Last Jedi with me and the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy. That will all be Patreon-only content. So there you have it, baby. I will see you on the other side.